What is the census? The Asian American population is massive, and it's concentrated in New York State is massive, and it's concentrated in New York City. So you can see the top 3 counties are Queens, Kings, which is Brooklyn, New York County, which is Manhattan. You see the Bronx is number 5, and then you see Richmond County, which is Staten Island, is number 8. So New York City, when you talk about Asian Americans in New York State, you're really talking about Asian Americans in New York City. For those of you who haven't actually seen what the census form looks like, this is what the paper form looks like. It's very simple. I mean, you can see you fill in, I think it's a total of 10 questions. How many people are in the residence? You mark down the type of people, how they're related to you, what type of dwelling it is, telephone number. It's actually very quick. Maybe it takes 10 minutes to complete. Here's the second page. And starting this year, you'll actually be able to complete it online. They'll send out the first mailing on March 12. You'll receive a unique code and a website that you can go to complete it online. You can fill it out on your phone. You can do it on your tablet. You can do it on a computer. You can do it at the library. The first reason why it matters is because the census determines how federal money is chopped up between the states and our communities, okay? So the census is how you get money you deserve for things like healthcare, housing, transportation, and schools. If you think that the roads are terrible, or that we don't have enough subway lines, or that there should be a school closer to where you live and there's a lot of kids, why don't they build some parks, then you should make sure you complete the census and everybody in your community completes the census. If you don't raise your hand and say that you exist there or that your child exists there, then the government doesn't know that they need to build a school there or build a road there, right? Just a quick rundown of how much money we get each year from the federal government. For healthcare alone, we get $38 billion. This is every year. For programs like SNAP, Head Start, the National School Lunch Program. So my son is 7. He goes to public school in Jackson Heights. He gets a free lunch every day, thanks to this federal money. And the New York State gets $6.5 billion every year for programs like that. For housing, for low-income housing, we get New York State gets $3.5 billion. For transportation, as I mentioned, we get $2 billion every year. And again, for schools, this is specifically for special education programs, we get $1.5 billion. So there's a lot of money that our communities receive based on the count that is taken during the census. If we're not counted, we're not going to get the money. This is the second deeper reason why the census matters. And it's that the census is the cornerstone of our democracy. It is written in the Constitution. I think it's like literally the 5th sentence in the first paragraph of the Constitution that we must carry out a census every 10 years. It affects our congressional representation, and I'll show you an example of in a second. It, as a result, also affects how many votes we get in the Electoral College during presidential elections. And finally, it affects redistricting, how our communities are chopped up into political units, whether it's for the House of Representatives or for the state assembly or even city council districts. The census data is used to chop up our neighborhoods into these little, sometimes very strangely shaped districts. This is what our current, New York State's current congressional delegation looks like. There are 26 pictures on this screen. There's 1 vacant seat in upstate New York. So New York State right now, based on the last census, was given 27 seats in the House of Representatives. You might recognize many of these faces. There's one particular face, Grace Meng, in the kind of top row towards the middle. You probably all recognize her. I would argue that her victory in 2012 was very much thanks to our decision to be counted in the 2010 census and the redistricting that happened as a result. I might say the same thing about AOC. So the census is about not just money that we deserve, it's about getting the representation we deserve. Again, if we don't stand up, raise our hands and say we exist, then no one will think of us when it comes time to make these districts and decide on who gets the political power, right? So a quick, again, history. In 1940, New York State had 45 members of Congress and 2 senators. So we had 47 electoral votes. I'm going to quickly fast forward to 2010, but you'll see the trend is that we have been losing seats. New York State has been losing influence on the national stage as a result of the census. Sometimes that's legitimate. Maybe it means other parts of the country are growing more quickly than New York State is. The prevailing theory is that New York is growing just as fast, but that so many of our communities don't respond to the census. We are undercounted, and I think the response rate in New York is, Howard might know the exact number, but it is double digits lower than the national average. So it's not that we're shrinking or that people are moving, it's that people in this city and this state are afraid to raise their hands and to fill out that form. And we need to change that. So who knows what will happen in 2020? Some people predict that if we get another undercount, if we're undercounted again, if our population doesn't all raise their hands and respond to that census, we may lose another seat or two in Congress, which means our voice as a state and every single one of our communities we lose our voice. Here's how it stands now. You'll see New York State gets 29 electoral votes. That's 27 members of Congress plus 2 senators. And again, that could shrink. You'll see that a number of other states that are growing quickly. You'll see California gets 55, Texas has 36. Florida, the great state of Florida, it's great, I love it. I've been to Disney World when I was a kid, but they're not the same. They shouldn't have the same amount of political power and representation as New York State. Just in my mind, my heart, that doesn't feel right, but they do. They have 29 electoral votes. And here's where I'm going to drive the point home for us here in Flushing, here in Queens. And this is where I'll return to the story of Representative Grace Meng. So before the 2010 census, this X is where we're sitting right now. This is what Congressional District, I think 5 looked like. And you can see it's kind of a strange shape. It looks like a fish eating off a piece, and they chopped it weird here. But because of that weird shape, you'll see it gets lots of Long Island and the suburbs. You get a chunk of Flushing, kind of pieces of Elmhurst. Because of that shape, the demographics of that population were 47% white and 33% Asian. After the 2010 census, based on population changes, they redrew the district lines, and they created a new district, Congressional District 6. Again, that X is that same spot. And you can see this shape, it's still a little weird, but it's a little tighter, a little more of a normal shape. And surprise, the demographics are 41% Asian, 33% white. And surprise again, for the first time ever, this area, this neighborhood, elected an Asian American member of Congress to represent us nationally. That is a victory for us. And that is a victory that came directly as a result of our decision in 2010 to be proud of our communities, be proud of our existence here, to raise our hands and be counted. So for 2020, we need to do it again. We need to make sure that we do even better, that every single one of us ourselves fills out the form, but also that we're going out, we're talking to people, we're talking to our friends, our neighbors, everybody, to stand up and be counted. And that's it. Thanks.